Singleton. Keeping with our animal theme, we're going to make a thing similar to the factory. If you haven't looked at the factory method and the abstract factory classes, you should do that. So I'm going to call this animal creator. It's going to look very similar to the factory class. In fact, I'll probably just rip off the code from the default one. This is a singleton, which means we can control the number of instances that created. In this case, I only want one to be created. So I'm going to mark this class as final. I don't want anyone to subclass it. I'm also going to give it a private constructor, which means no one can call that except me. Depending on what you're doing, that might be enough, and you just mark this method as static. And now we can take our original main, put it in here and get rid of this bit of code here and say animal is assigned the animal creator dot create animal with the type of cat and the name of Terry. And we can run that. Terry says meow. Now Terry is going to be a dog, not a cat dog. And there we go. Right. So same thing. All we've done is moved the code out. So that is one way of creating essentially a singleton. This is kind of a special case, which I would call a utility class. So utility class, it's final, it has a private constructor and all static methods. That's generally how you know it. The difference between that and a singleton is we actually can create an instance of a singleton. But we don't create it directly. There's various ways to go about doing this. I'm going to show you the simple one. So we are able to create an instance, even though this is private, we are allowed to create it ourselves. So we have one constructor, awesome. It's private, only we can call it, awesome. And we're only going to call it from the static block, and we're only going to assign it to this. So there's only one of them, a singleton, a single instance, singleton. And this now becomes not a static method. And the difference over here is we don't call animal creator create animal. We have to again do the same thing. Final animal creator. Oh, sorry, I think I made this. Should be public. Creator. We could typically this is actually called instance. Doesn't have to be called instance, just what we normally call it. So the benefit of this over the static method, the utility method, is that we have an object we can pass around, which means I can steal a bit of code from the abstract factory, I think it was. And call make animal. borrow the make animal class, method. If we run this now, it will still work. There's a cat. It says meow. So again, we've got this class that we can pass around. You might be wondering at this point in time, wait a second, you've just made me watch the factory method, then you made me watch the animal factory, and now you're doing basically the exact same thing with the singleton. Why are there so many different ways of doing the same thing? Each of them has their own benefit and trade-off. So singleton usually just extends object. It doesn't have a hierarchy with it. That's where the animal factory comes in. Animal factory, the abstract factory is strictly for creation. Animal creator, in this case, the singleton, it could have any number of methods. And they're not all necessarily for creation or that. It's just a singleton is a way to limit things. Quite often, an animal factory may be implemented with a singleton. So the default animal factory and the verbose animal factory, those might not have public constructors. They might be, final classes. So you can mix and match to do whatever you need. Generally, an animal factory is going to have one method. It might have multiple creation methods. There could be different ways of creating. It's possible. Not usual, but it could be done that way. A singleton, any number of methods. And you don't make them static is the idea. You're trying to get rid of the static methods. The reason we don't like static methods is, again, they lock you into something. So you make a static method in a class, you now have to refer to that class to get access to that static method. Your code is now tied to that static class. By making the instance static and all of these non-static, we're now able to pass the instance around and call methods on it. So essentially, the factory, the abstract factory, factory method, and singleton are all different ways to avoid you from having to say new in your code. If you look at this, I haven't said new anywhere. Right? There is no occurrence of the word new, yet I'm able to make methods. Right? The abstract factory, depending on how we implement these things, this has no new. This one does, because ultimately something's going to say new. And this one, no new. And then the factory method, same thing. There's no new in here. There is a new, because that's why we implemented this, or if we use the reflection stuff, there's no new at all, right? So it is entirely possible to write an entire program without using the word new, if you use reflection. So singleton, not just for creation, but designed so that you are not using new. Animal factory and factory method, definitely designed to replace new. The singleton, designed so that you only have a fixed number, typically one, instance of the thing you're creating or that you're working with. Why do we do this? It saves time and energy, right? There's no state in this class. There's none of the classes we've had have state. The only class that we have that has state is the abstract animal, which knows about the name. Right? There's state. Every animal has a different name. This thing, there is no state. All these methods are independent of one another. There's no need to create multiple instances because they're all going to behave exactly the same way. If they're always going to behave the exact same way, you may as well use static methods. But static methods have the drawback of you're tying your program to that class name. Doing any of these things, the factories or the singleton, helps you remove your tie to those names. which allows you to make your classes much more flexible. So you will see that these patterns are similar in many ways, and there's subtle differences, and you'll use one in one circumstance and one in a different circumstance, and sometimes you may not know which one to use, and it's a judgment call. Those are all things that come in much later in your career when you've worked for a long time, and you have worked out all the different ways things work. And you've got experience. But for now, don't worry about it. Pick and choose what you can and use it in whatever way you can.